Okay, so just recall from the previous video, we had created this file called friends.txt in Notepad, and it just has 3 names in it. Okay, now I'm going to go into Dev C++, and I'm going to talk about using input files and pulling that data in from that text file into our program. The other thing, and this was stated in the previous video, but this file that I'm working with here, inputfiles.cpp, our input file that we create in Notepad has to be in the same folder as your CPP file. And if it is not, this is not going to work. Okay, so we do need to include fstream. That's a library that we work with input files, or that contains the code for our input files. And we're going to declare an input file stream object or a variable. ifstream is the data type, right, short for input file. And input file is the variable name. So you could change this variable name if you want. This is what I'm using in this particular program. And I'm going to read in 3 names from my file. So I'm going to have 3 string variables that are going to hold these names. Okay. This next section of code, well, first of all, let's just talk about this. You have to open the input file. We saw this with output files as well. So we use our input file variable or object called input file .open, and then we specify the name of the file. And the name of the file has to be enclosed in double quotes. It's a string. And so when it sees this line of code, it's going to open up that file. So it already has to exist on disk. You have to create it first. All right, and then it's going to associate that file with this input file variable in our program. So important with input files is checking to make sure it found your input file. This is just a check here, and you'll see we have, if the input file is okay, there's actually a Boolean flag in here that will be true. And if it's okay, we just want the program to continue. So you'll see that I used a not operator in front of this, because if it's okay, right, it's true. Not true is false, and then it'll bypass the body of the if statement. But if there's a problem, it can't find the file, either it's not in the right location or you don't have the right name. This guy will be false. Not false is true, and then it'll display a message. I can't find your input file. It's good to pause. The system pause will just pause for a second before the program ends, and then exit -1 just exits right out of the program, doesn't go any further. And if you can't find your input file, you really shouldn't go any further. Okay, and I'll run the program, to demonstrate this in just a minute. So then there's just a cout statement that says reading from the file. So we know when we read from the input stream, we use cin, then an input operator, and then our variable. Well, here we're using input file, then an input operator, and our variable. So this is going to go to the file. It's going to read the very first name, right, which is Bob. And it's going to store Bob in name 1, and then it's going to go to our file again, and it's going to read the next string that it finds, right, which is Carol, and then it's going to come down here and read the third name in our file, right, which is Dave. And then we just to test to see if it works, right, the names in the file are, and this should change, this should display those 3 names. And just like with output files, we should then close the file. So I'm going to run this and show you what it looks like. Okay, the names in the file are Bob, Carol, and Dave. Now, I'm going to come back up here for a second, and I'm just going to change my file name to this. Now, I don't have a file with that file name, so if I run this, you'll see the message I get. I can't find the input file. Okay, so lots of times input files are tricky. So putting this little if statement in your code, it's always going to tell you, is there a problem finding your file or a problem with your code? A lot of times I see students think that they have a problem with their code, so they try and change it around, but the actual problem was with the file. You'll notice over here, This is just another way to do this. There is a fail function that basically does the same thing. If it fails, it can't find your file, it'll give you this message. Some people like to use the fail function. The author of our textbook seems to like to do it this way, so I just like to show you both ways. Now keep in mind, if you need to change the input file, you've got to go back to Notepad. So let's go back here and let's just change this to Alice, okay? And then I'm going to save my file again in Notepad. And then when I run my program, now you'll see that I've got Alice, Carol, and Dave, okay?